it's Tandy from Common Ground, Alaska, and I'm here today with Lisa Kristy, and I'm really, really excited for this show. Someone, I can't remember who now, connected me with Lisa as a vermiculturist. Is that would that be the word we would call you?
That would probably be a word, yeah.
Lisa works with worms and makes compost with the worm droppings. So I don't know anything about this. So we're just going to jump right in and we're going to learn from Lisa. So Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about yourself first?
Let's see. I've been here in Alaska. I live in Wasilla in Meadow Lakes for about 20 years.
Okay.
And I just love Alaska. And so when COVID started, me and my neighbor decided we needed to get the COVID chickens like everybody else.
Everybody got COVID chickens.
And she was way into the chickens, where I was kind of like, and all I was really interested in was feeding them and getting better eggs and stuff. And so that's what I was doing. And I thought, well, I'll give them some worms. And so I looked a little bit on YouTube and read a little bit and way overbuilt a bin and went to Alaska Mill and Feed and got a couple worms. And I put them outside under a tree, watered them, fed them. And about September, I'm like, oh, I should probably bring those worms in and they'll freeze. And I didn't want to lose my worms. And I'd moved them around, but I really hadn't gotten into them much. But I brought them in and really got interested in them and started reading a lot more, watching a lot more videos. And by sometime in the winter, I needed to split the bin because I had too many worms in there. And I had also done some research on how to keep bugs out of the house because I was really concerned about that, having fruit flies and other little critters. And what I found out was that you could freeze the food and blend it. And you don't have to blend it, but I do that and put it in there and you don't have those issues.
Nice.
And anyway, it's become my thing.
That's really fun.
Yeah. So I have probably sold, I don't know, 12 sold or given away 12 pounds of worms and a lot of vermicompost just to people in my neighborhood that have gardens. And they love getting it. And they say that it's a miracle grow.
That's what I hear. That's
yes.
That's definitely what
yes.
you hear. So you got the worms for your chickens, but the chickens, if I remember your story right, the chickens had no interest at all.
They were free range and they were getting their own bugs and worms. So I handed them a worm and they're like, whatever,
I'm not interested.
So but I like the worms.
Yeah. So that's how you ended up being an accidental worm farmer.
Yes.
So that's fun. Earlier in the week we had an accidental composter. So I think we're accidental farmers. So what can I say? I'd say accidents are a good thing, maybe. So you brought your worms in and in the house, and you said you were worried about bugs, so you were feeding them compost and you were worried about is it like kitchen scraps and stuff, and you just didn't want them sitting around to bring in fruit flies and everything, and that's why you froze
if you food. Don't because if you don't freeze the food, whatever bug eggs and things are on there will be in the compost, and it's a perfect environment because it's a warmer environment and it's for them to hatch. So, and you can get, so I've had a few springtails and they just kind of cleared up and they're fine in the compost. They help compost, but you don't want them to overrun it. I had some red mites at one point, and I just took some watermelon, and they like watermelon too.
Okay.
And so they would get on that. I could just set it on top and they would get on that and I could rinse them off, and those went away quickly.
Oh, good.
And those were always mistakes I'd made of putting a banana or a watermelon rind, getting excited that I had a banana and watermelon rind and not putting it in the freezer first.
Yeah.
So I've learned my lesson.
Well, that makes sense. And what a simple fix.
Right.
And
you can just a few hours, you put it in the freezer and then you can go and put it in the bin.
Okay. So, and you said you blend them. You run them through the blend. Do you pulp them or do you just kind of chop them?
I just put all so my whole modus operandi is basically people give me scraps because I'm just one person. So there's not enough scraps to feed the worms, but people will give me scraps, or I get them from maybe the grocery store and things like that. And then in the wintertime, they get to sit outside. And then when the worms need food, or maybe I work during the winter for long periods of time. So I go away for long periods of time. So I'll make a whole bunch up. And so I just bring them in, put them in the blender, add a little water. And then I usually put some worm chow in there, and that varies depending on what I have. So a lot of times it's oats.
Oh, okay.
And I had a big old bag of beans that I'm like, I don't want to use these anymore. And so I just ground those up.
Oh,
And things like that. Someone moved away from Alaska and they gave me all their shelved, like flowers and things like that.
oh,
So chicken feed, I put chicken feed in there. And so I just put all that together. And then like, if I'm getting ready to feed, I just take the blender and put it in there.
okay.
And then if not, I freeze it again.
Perfect.
And then I thaw it out when I need it. And then because I'm gone last summer for my tour director job, I was basically gone all summer. And so, but I can tell I have someone taking care of things, and I'm get in the freezer and get a bag out and feed it about now. And so, and they take care of them.
So some people have dog sitters or cat sitters, and you have a worm sitter.
All three. I have all three things.
Oh, well, okay.
But yes, if you're gonna pet sit for me, you're gonna do worms also.
Yeah, that's a little unusual, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. So, and basically you taught yourself using YouTube.
Mostly YouTube. I have right here this little book that Worms Eat Your Garbage, and it's like the Bible for worm people.
Perfect.
And
I'll link to this in the show notes. So
Mary Applehop. There's also a video it's hilarious because it's like a 90s weird video. But it's fun to watch. You'll laugh through it. But this just has all the basics in it.
Okay.
And so I've read this, not when I first started though. I was probably a year in before I got a book.
Okay. But it sounds like this is a good one if you're thinking of getting started. Yes. Okay. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about your bin setup. So it says you start your bins with shredded paper and cardboard, and then how does that work exactly?
Okay. So I save up all my cardboard that could be used for that. I don't use, and it's not that you can't, I'm just cautious with my worms. Anything with color on it, anything with a lot of ink. So just regular cardboard.
Like Amazon boxes?
Okay. Amazon boxes are great. Stuff, sometimes you get something from Costco that doesn't have a lot of color, whatever it is. So I keep all of those, and then I shred them up, and I did get it's like an 18-page shredder.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So, and it does a really good job. And that's probably the biggest expense I put into worms. And I needed a paper shredder anyway. So
there you go.
And so I just continually shred that up. And then I either get peat moss or coco coir.
Okay.
I just keep a big bag of that in the back room. And then once a bin gets full and I need to bait them out, and I'll talk about that a little later on how we do that.
Okay.
I make a new bin and I let it sit for like a week. And so it's the cardboard and the peat and the coco coir or whichever, and whatever, there's no, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. It's just whatever I have at the time.
Okay.
And you could probably do all cardboard.
Okay.
But I just like them to have like
and that's like the bedding part. That's what
right.
goes
That's
in the
bedding.
Okay.
And you don't want to get over, no matter what size bin you use, you don't want to get over like 2 feet in there. You don't want it too deep because they're not bottom dwellers.
Okay.
So you're just going to have a bunch of stuff in the bottom is what's going to happen.
Okay.
And then I use coffee that I get from the coffee stand.
Oh, like coffee grounds?
Yeah. That's already spent, not the other ones. You'll get them a little too jittery.
Okay. Have amped up worms
already. And you don't even want to put that many because a lot of that's espresso and stuff, and it still has a lot of caffeine in it. So I don't put a whole bunch, but probably I'd say a cup with a new bin.
Okay.
And then I put the food in, and I put grit, which can be like grit you use for your chickens, like oyster shell and things like that. Since I have chickens and I have shells, I have this little system of I have a baking tray at my bottom of my oven, the bottom rack. And then as I use eggs, I just put them in there, and then they get baked as I bake things.
Okay.
So it's not a big deal to do it. And then once I have like a full tray, I take them and I put them in a coffee grinder and I grind those up, and they do need to be ground up small to be grit. If you put big eggshells in there, it's not grit at that point.
Okay.
It's little places for worms to hang out.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And so I put all that together.
So the eggshells don't hurt them? I feel like, I guess if they're ground up, they wouldn't, but they're sharp.
Grit.
Okay.
No, they're ground. I'm almost to a powder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, and it's grit. And And they do have to have some kind of grit. You can use play sand, you can use a lot of different things. I'm really trying with the worms to use what I have.
Sure.
Yeah. And so you put that together, let it sit for a week. I put some food in it, and it's nice and damp. And damp, what I mean by damp, and this is probably the most important thing about worm bins,
Okay.
is that it should be like a wet sponge.
Okay.
And like if you took it and did like that, you should get more than 1 or 2 drops of water. And if you get nothing and it's still wet, that's fine.
Okay.
So, and yeah, that will cause you more problems. Having too dry, they die.
Oh, okay.
And then too wet, you have smell problems.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So, but it sits there for a week, and then I start putting in my worms from another bin, and I just move them out like that. And I've been doing that for 2.5 years now.
Wow. Okay. All right. So I did notice one thing in your notes that I wanted to bring up is if you have city water, you're going to use that to be watering your worms just to let it sit. I didn't know how this works, but
yeah, and I don't have to think about that because I'm on a well, but
Right.
I did want to add that, yes, if you're like in the city of Wasilla, if there's any chlorine in your water at all, you need to let that chlorine gas off. So let it sit for about 24 hours.
And then that's no longer an issue.
Right. Or you could use other water.
Sure.
That you buy at the store that doesn't have chlorine in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that you could do that. So that's learning all sorts of new things today. All right. So, okay. So now you're getting ready to move the worms over. So how do you said you bait them. How do you bait the worms? This is
There's
interesting.
so many different ways to do this. And I have fun figuring out different ways. One of the ways I do it is I take an egg carton, the bottom of an egg carton, and I will wet it down with warm water. I put some molasses on it.
Oh.
And then and that's my own thing. I don't know if it's a worm thing, but I think molasses has got to be good, right?
Right.
But not real heavy because you don't want them getting in there.
Sure.
In the thick stuff. And then just things they really like. So like frozen apple, banana, watermelon, any kind of fruit, something sweet like that. And then maybe also some ground up food with that. And then, I bury it down in there and cover it up. And then if I wait a week, I go in there, I've just got a bunch of worms hanging out.
Nice.
Having a big worm party.
Okay.
And then I just move the whole thing over.
The egg carton and all?
Yeah.
Okay.
And and it depends on, sometimes I don't because I don't have enough stuff to do a new bake. But most of the time I take the whole thing and just put it in there. And that's how I move worms. And sometimes for a while I had a big cotton tablecloth that I was going to get rid of, and I was using it for covering and stuff. And so I made little like handkerchief things to put it in, and they would go in there. Just something that they're not going to eat as quickly, that you can pick it up. And the best thing was my next door neighbor that was taking care of the worms this last time I was gone. She had one of the old type of like blueberry containers, the ones with they're hardier plastic, and they have there's holes. They're not really holes, it's like lines. You know what I'm talking about?
Kind of crisscross ones or whatever?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a sturdier plastic, and she, I had one of those laying around, and so she put all the stuff in there. I got back, I'm like, oh, I had to send her a picture. I mean, it was just full. Nice. And they really like that. So, and that's the whole thing about it, is I can play around and experiment and try different things. And
you can use what you have, which I think is beautiful too. And the other piece is with most animals, you don't, there isn't that time, with chickens, you feed them, the chickens get our table scraps, but they don't sit around. So it's nice that you can kind of get ahead with worms. You can have apple cores and all sorts of things and just throw them in the freezer, and then you're ahead with worm food. I love that. That's really neat. And just the idea of using what you have, and that they thrive off of that too. That's pretty great.
Yeah. What I didn't mention at the beginning is a lot of getting into the worms also started with, I was trying to, with COVID, cut my bills. And so I cut my trash off. Oh, and Wi-Fi too. But, and I was only I went from a full trash can every week to, just having one bag of trash. Wow. Because I was getting rid of my cardboard, and I was getting rid of all my scraps. And I was more conscious of it. Sure. But it sure helped a lot. And yeah, and I would give that one bag to my neighbor. And yeah, so I didn't have trash anymore, which
Nice.
is huge, I think.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
helping me and I'm helping the environment.
totally.
Yeah.
And you're saying, I mean, every week we take our trash down, I think, how much money are we you know, how could I have done this differently?
Right.
So that we aren't throwing away all of this. What can we change? And we're making changes slowly, but the worms just seem perfect. So, okay, so you when you move this, you know, egg container over, I'm assuming there's still some worms in the old bin. Is that right? So now you have two bins. Is that how that
Right.
works? So the ones that stayed behind stay there and they build a new colony in the old bin. Is
No.
that how that works?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is get all the worms out, and it takes a long time. And there
Oh,
are
you get
other
them
ways
all
to
out.
do this.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because that other bin is going to be compost now for your garden.
Aha. Okay.
And so slowly, but I can get pretty much all the worms, but now there's cocoons left in there.
Aha.
And a lot of them. And the best way to figure out, because you can't see them, they're hard to see. But I was just happened to be when I had a headlamp on and I decided to check on them.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, I can see the cocoons now.
Aha.
So
There's
get
your
a
tip.
headlamp. You put
Get
a
a headlamp.
on. Yeah. And so I will get in there with the headlamp and pick them out. And there are other ways to sift them. I'm not in that big of a hurry to get through with it, and I enjoy it. It's cathartic to me to play in the dirt. So I just sit there and pick them out. And you can put them in the new bin you've got, or you can start a little breeder bin in like a shoebox.
Okay.
And
that's what you have
and
here.
that's what I have right there.
Okay. All right.
Yes. And then in perfect conditions, they will hatch in 23 days.
Oh, okay.
So you can put, you just put them in there, and you can put, usually I put the dry worm chow, so that, because it's going to be a while before anything's eating. So I put dry worm chow there and wet it down, and then just leave it. And then, I don't know, in a month I check on it and I have babies.
All right. Oh, that's so fun.
So yeah, we have worm nurseries. And
oh my gosh, that's so cool. So your dry worm chow is what is in your dry worm chow?
The things I was talking about adding. So chicken feed, and Walmart had this big corn flour bag that was clearanced for like $5. It was like, I don't know, 50 pounds or something. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll take that. And the beans that I ground up, and oats, and just old mixes, cornmeal mixes, and things like that people have given me that's dated out and things like that. Yeah. And so I have just little, and sometimes I'm too busy to thaw something out or whatever. And so I can just put that on top, wet it down, and go. And they have food. And feeding them. So this is really interesting. There's all kinds of theories on that. So about once a week is a good idea if you're just maintaining a bin. So like if you started a bin, you want to put all your scraps somewhere, maybe in the freezer. And then on Fridays, maybe you get it out.
Oh, okay.
And you blend it or not. I blend it because it makes it more accessible to them quicker. And I'm growing worms. So I'm wanting a lot of worms. But if you didn't want to do that, you could just bury all your frozen scraps in there. And they decompose much quicker if you frozen them too. And then put the dirt over and let it go. And then the next week, and then you just check for moisture. A lot of times the food gives it enough moisture, but we've got a dry climate here, and you really have to. A lot of other people I read in other parts of the world have problems with too much moisture, but my problem has been not having enough moisture. So I've got like a little garden sprayer that I use, and I fluff them up every time I put food in and just make sure they're okay.
I love that.
and I always do it raw hand, because I can feel if the bin feels right, and that's just from doing it for a while.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So, and you also said that you started growing wheatgrass and putting it on top.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That's really
so
fun.
And this was there's a gentleman that basically he is making castings, worm castings, and selling them on a fairly large scale up in New York.
Okay.
But one of the things he does is he grows wheatgrass. He's got this huge bin that spans his garage.
Oh, wow.
And so he grows wheatgrass and puts it on top, and it does several things. It helps keep moisture in. It provides warmth.
Okay.
And like my house runs I run my heat at 60, and probably back where the worms are, it's more like 55.
Okay.
So anything I can do to warm up the bin.
Sure.
So it provides warmth, and it's also food.
Mm-hmm.
And they like to go up in there, and if some of them are on top sometimes, and they're having a little beach day or
Cute.
or whatever. So and yeah, the wheatgrass, I got it off Amazon, and you put some water with it for a few days, and then you can put it in like your compost that you have, and then grow it. It takes about a week.
Okay.
And I do that once every couple months.
Wow. So cool. Wow, that's really neat. Okay, so then you talked about Amazon envelopes. There's recyclable ones. This is, I guess we're getting to the lid now. Are we going in the right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't use lids, and just about anyone. So anyone that I give or sell worms to, I always tell them to call me, and the call that I get almost, I don't know, half the time is my worms are trying to get out.
Oh.
And I say, do you have a lid on it? And they say yes. I'm like, take the lid off, put something else down as a lid. And like, for instance, I have this little, it was an envelope that they've eaten
Okay.
the paper off of.
Oh, I
as
see.
you can see.
Yeah. So they're not
Yes.
going to eat the plastic.
But they don't eat the plastic. Right. And
awesome.
and that's what I'm using for this little bin. That's
Okay.
what I'm using for a lid.
And they don't escape.
No. And as a matter of fact, I got European night crawlers for the first time because they're fishing worms. I got a lot of calls for those last year.
Okay.
And I thought, well, I can do that too. And they are notorious for trying to escape.
Okay.
Like people tell you, just put them under light. I didn't do anything different, and none of them. I was so happy. None of them trying to leave. So
well, and she drove in her car with like this. So, and her car's not worm ridden or whatever. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I put them in the plastic bag, and
right.
more to keep them warm.
Yeah.
And then also if I had to stop quickly or something, I didn't want them all over the car.
Sure.
Yeah. So yes.
Awesome. Okay. Okay. And then you said when you first built your bins, you put holes for water drainage, but you said then you just decided that was overcomplicating.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, at first I thought that the juice that comes out of there was good, and it's really not. It can have bad bacteria in it and all kinds of things. So it's not. So we've all heard of compost tea, and there's also worm tea, and which we call liquid gold. And I've made it a few times, but the thing is, so if you're getting it off of Amazon, you might be getting, it may have been good, a month ago.
Okay.
But it needs to be it has to have oxygen. So even like if you bought some from me, you would need to take the lid off of it. It has to have oxygen because it's microbes in there that are working. And that's the magic.
Okay.
So if you don't have that, if it's been, closed up for a month, you've just got some juice.
Okay. So I'm going to go off script here for a second. So what about when you buy those plastic bags of worm castings? Someone just asked in our gardening class last week, she said she got a bunch of bags of worm castings that were expired. And so she got them for cheap because they were expired, and she asked about using them. None of us knew. We're not worm people. So
if they're not moist, the microbes are going to die.
Oh.
It's just that simple. And I don't know how moist. I saw them. I almost bought one at Costco because I saw that at Costco last time I was there. I almost bought one to see, is it moist at all? Because if it dries out, there's no microbes. And I mean, it's not bad for your garden. There's probably some good to it, but it's not the same thing.
It's not going to be the same.
I have, I still have compost from last year, and I've kept it wet.
Okay.
The whole time to make sure it's good, and kept it fluffed up. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And
amazing tip right there.
I think it's a big deal because a lot of people are going to spend a lot of money because fertilizer is so expensive right now.
That's the thing.
And they're going to spend money on that, and they're really not getting much out of it.
Okay. Well, there's your, you get your money's worth on this show. Okay. Very good. All right. So, let's see, you talked about the pump sprayer, and, I guess, did you have is there anything else on this that you wanted to add before? I have a few questions, but is there anything on this kind of setting up and maintaining that you wanted to talk about?
think I just want to express that it's really simple. You can be messy with it. Like if you had a little room like we're in here right now, you can go and take care of them. There's a little dirt there. and you can, or you could be as clean as you want with it. You don't have to have bugs.
That's important, knowing
Yeah.
that you don't have to
I
have
didn't,
bugs.
I don't want fruit flies and
Yeah,
other bugs in
no.
my house.
Mm-mm.
And so if you freeze your food, you won't have that issue and bury it. And to me, it's like I said, I'm amazed that I'm a worm person. I wasn't particularly, if I found a worm, I'd probably go, ooh.
Yeah.
But to watch them, go from a cup to, I run 8 bins, which means I'm taking worms out of them all the time
Mhm.
in a couple of years is amazing to me.
Mhm.
And then just to watch their life cycle, and their worms are really interesting. And they're hermaphrodites, but they have to have someone else to mate with.
Oh, okay.
So they're an unusual species. And and then if you have kids, just to teach them that this is a basic life species thing, and to watch that. And then just the whole thing of knowing you're doing better for the environment.
Yes.
And taking care of things. And for me, I would really like to see this go much more scaled up. And I know there are a lot of people interested in that. And like, I work on the North Slope and I see all these scraps. And I know how much money it costs them to get rid of it, because it has to be hauled out of there. They don't have a place to put that garbage.
Oh,
and so I'd love to talk to ConocoPhillips about, hey, why don't we figure out a way to have worms up here?
Yeah.
And then at least if you're hauling out something, it's vermicompost.
That's right.
Wow. And it is going bigger scale. And when I first started doing this, I remember reading a story about a restaurant in Brooklyn, an upscale restaurant in Brooklyn. And I assume that it costs a lot of money, to get your trash hauled away.
Oh, yeah.
I would think.
Yes.
Yes. So they started a worm bin down below to take care of their organic scraps. And you can't put meat in there. You need to know that.
Okay. No meat.
No meat. But it takes it too long to decompose.
Makes sense.
But so they were separating out their scraps and doing this. And anyway, I guess some of the waiters and waitresses started talking about it, and people got interested, and they started selling worms and vermicompost. So people would come in for this really nice dinner and then go down to the basement and buy worms and vermicompost. And I thought that's the coolest thing ever.
That is the coolest thing ever. And it paints quite the picture.
Right. They're making money.
Yeah.
Instead of, so there's profit and it's good for the environment. And, it's a what blesses one blesses all situation.
Yep. That's right. And we're not, it's good for the environment, but it's good for all pieces of it. It's good for people to learn where our food is coming from. And it's good to not pay money for a chemical to fertilize your garden when you can.
And that's another thing, fertilizer. We are running out of fertilizer right now because the urea that goes into it is from Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
There's an issue there. And also that's what goes into the DEF in trucks. So there's not an infinite supply of it.
Yeah.
And everyone's probably going to notice when they go out this spring to do the gardens, when they go to get fertilizer, it's about 3 times higher than it was.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yes. So yeah.
So let's make our own.
Come to me and I'll show you how to do this.
Okay. Now when we did worms for a short time, and we just did it in a 5-gallon bucket, and that worked really well. Now I don't remember the setup exactly, but I remember somehow we had one of those like a fabric filter thing in there. I'm not sure what we used it for. I don't know. Tell us how to use a 5-gallon bucket.
So yes, that would be, and there are a lot of worms, especially for breeder bins. And you can just get a bunch of Home Depot buckets, and you would do your bedding in there and then put your worms in and just fluff them up like I talked about.
And no holes or anything.
You don't need to. I mean, if you're going to overwater or something like that, you need to, but just if you keep an eye on it, it's not necessary. And I just had, so I had to have 2 Rubbermaid things instead of 1.
Okay.
And, because it would drain into the other one. And then if it sat too long, it gets stinky.
Yeah, of course.
And like I said, that liquid that comes out of there is not compost tea.
Aha. Okay.
So it may have some benefits, and it may have some bad bacteria in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do I know when it's time? So now I've had my 5-gallon bucket for however long. How do I know it's time to move to a new one? And what do I do with this stuff?
So when you have vermicompost or castings or worm poop, whatever you want to call it, when you're putting your hands in there. And, that's one of the reasons I put cardboard in every one. You don't have to, you could just use coconut coir.
Okay.
But I can tell when the cardboard's gone that they're about done.
Aha.
So those little shreds of cardboard aren't there anymore. I'm like, oh, they're about done. But the real test is when you go through there, when you need to wash your hands, it's like poop. It sticks.
Oh.
And so dirt doesn't.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
and that's one of the reasons I use my hands too most of the time, is because
Yeah.
then I can tell. I don't know. I haven't tried it with a glove when I'm doing that.
Okay.
But it would also stick to the glove more than dirt would.
Okay.
And so, yeah, when your hands are like, ew, sticky, then you know that it's just about done. And then when the cardboard's done.
And then you put your bait in, and then you just start moving.
And I start moving them out.
Okay.
And then I have big bins, the big Costco bins, that I move. So once a bin, because my bins are, I don't know, like that. They're
Okay.
just regular, what you
Just
go
like a
if you
tote?
needed a tote.
Okay.
Yeah, just a regular sized tote. And so by the time they eat through everything, I may have like a foot in the bottom, sometimes 18 inches.
Okay.
And so I just move that into a bigger bin that I'm also baiting, because I've got cocoons in there. So when the babies are
Aha.
born, and then I have to keep that wet and fluff it up until someone, purchases it, or I give it to someone to use in their garden.
Okay. And then you just spread it in your garden and dig it in.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And it's about, they say 20 to 30% vermicompost to whatever soil you're using.
Okay. Okay. Well, that sounds pretty straightforward. How do you know how many worms to get?
That's a good question. So probably if you're just going to do, like, you want to get rid of your kitchen scraps, and maybe use a little vermicompost every once in a while. Because you can take it like off the top, like you've got a new plant, you just plant it, you can take some off the top, put it in there.
Okay.
If you're gonna do that, you can go get a cup, you can get a couple worms.
Just a
Start
couple?
a
Like
bin.
two?
No, a cup.
Oh, a cup of worms. I was like,
Get
two?
a cup of
Wow.
2 worms. You gotta have two. One won't work. Yeah, but no, a cup of worms. And that's
Okay.
what I started with.
Okay. You started with a cup of worms.
I started with 1 cup
2
of
years
worms.
ago?
Yeah,
Okay.
about 2.5 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
All right.
And yeah, and then if you really wanted to go full scale, like maybe you're doing what I'm doing now,
Mhm.
you'd probably at least want to have a pound, which is 2 cups to start.
Okay. Very good. Okay. What are some ways to use worm castings beyond just sprinkling them over your soil? Are there any other, like, can you make compost tea, and is there an
You can
advantage
make
to it,
compost
or
tea, and I
are there other
have.
things?
I have. So, and all I did, I got an aquarium bubbler.
Okay.
And used a Home Depot bucket, and I put in I have some paint strainers,
Okay.
and so I just put the castings in there, and then I let it bubble for, I don't know, 24, 36 hours, and you put molasses in there to give it some microbiology
Okay.
going in there. And then and I haven't done it because you have to be, I would ask people if they were interested, and I get people that were interested, and I make like 10 gallons of it, and then they wouldn't show up, and then I have something that's going to go bad.
Sure.
And it has a smell to it, and you can tell when it doesn't smell anymore that it's really not doing anything.
Oh, okay.
So
Is it high? So 10 gallons, to me seems like that's 2 buckets full. That seems like a lot of fertilizer. Would that go pretty far, or is
it
it?
would go way far. Like,
Okay.
you would probably just get a gallon from me if you were like gonna really spruce up all your plants in the house, and maybe have some stuff. You just get a gallon at a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And everyone says it's amazing. And I had on the vermicompost, a lady down the street, I had a lot of extra, and I'm like, would you like it? She was planting her garden, and so her and her neighbor planted like the same garden,
Mhm.
and hers was amazing,
Okay.
and the other ones did okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I also gave it to my church. The plants were just not looking good. I'm like, here, I'm gonna leave this. I told someone I'm gonna leave it, and at the end, she was like, look at these plants. I can't believe they.
Oh,
And
that's
we even
really
had
fun.
a extra tomato, I guess. She's
Oh.
like, and we have a bonus tomato here that we grow in one of the hanging baskets.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
And you know how hard it is to grow tomatoes, and
Yeah.
tomato grew by itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So
really cool.
and I don't have time to garden because
Yeah.
I work all summer.
Yeah, you travel a lot.
So I haven't got to try it out. So I just,
Sure.
I just have what my friends tell me.
So on that, just to stay on that for just a second, we have 4 acres of orchard that all is set up with drip tube. And we have a fertilizer injector. And so now we currently use a granular fertilizer, which isn't perfect, but
Right.
it's what we have. It's
Right.
we use what we have. But that's the one piece that we'd like to kind of steer away from. But when we talked about it, we thought, man, it takes 4 acres is a lot to fertilize. So, but if you're saying that, we could, in 2 years work up to the point where just at our house, we could maybe make our own tea with it.
Yes.
That might be,
And I think you would be
something to think about.
amazed with the results.
probably so.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay. Also one other question, what's the ideal temperature for worms? They can't freeze, right?
That's correct. So this, I guess I haven't even been clear about this. So the worms that I'm using is really, and it's really important which worm you have, are
Okay.
the best composting worms, so they say. And they are called red wigglers, and they have a Antonetia felida or something scientific name.
Okay.
But they're red wigglers. They're hard to get if you order like from out of state. It's hard to get pure ones. And it's kind of important because most of the worm suppliers will put in blues with them. And the blues won't make it up here unless you have a really warm house, because the blues are like African.
Okay.
They're tropical worms.
And we're not tropical.
No. But the reds do well. Like I said, they do, it's probably 55 degrees back there. And there are things you can do to warm your bin, like the wheatgrass, and manure helps. You can put manure, aged manure, like cow and horse manure in there. Moose poo.
Oh, really?
Yes. If you can find a big enough bundle of it.
What
Yeah.
about rabbit? Could we put the
Yes,
poop in
rabbit and goat.
Okay.
Are perfect. Yes.
Nice.
And that's another way to get rid of that type of thing.
Yeah.
We may have to talk about rabbit food when we're done.
It's in my compost right now.
But yeah, and you're like you're super composting things is what you're doing. But yeah, so there are things you can do, due diligence and look things up, and you can warm them up. You just have to be careful because you can warm them up too much. So the range is supposed to be 40 to about 85 for red wigglers. And they're the range isn't as high for my European night crawler, so I'll have to keep some manure in there to keep it warm. And I'm growing some wheatgrass right now to keep it warm. Yeah. Okay. And they have to have lime also, because they're the acid level has to be neutral for them. So I'm having to care for them, think about them a little more. But it's okay.
Yeah. They take a little bit more pampering.
Yes.
Very good. What can you not put in a worm bin? You mentioned not putting meat in. What else can you not put in there?
So that's debatable.
Okay.
I'm cautious.
Okay.
And I don't put, like, when people give me scraps, I'll pull out onion, and if it's like a whole onion. Okay. But so onions, not peppers. Okay. Pineapple.
That seems like that would be caustic.
Yeah. So not a whole bunch of tomato. You don't want to get things too acidic. So I think the whole thing is thinking in a broader picture. Okay. And so maybe not citrus. A little bit of onion, no citrus. Okay. Yeah. But there are people that run examples on YouTube of putting jalapenos only in a bin, and the worms are fine. Oh. I'm not willing to take those kind of risks. And I think a little bit, everything, just a little bit. So if you're I don't want to go through every scrap, but if I know there's like a whole onion, I'll do something else with that. Okay. And put it in. I have it outside compost too, but that only happens in the summer here.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And you can also, if you're already a composter, this is really neat. You can use your compost for a worm bin. So that's already used. That's what you can use instead of the peat moss. Okay. Well, interesting. Yes. Oh, wow. But it has to be frozen in my world, and so I haven't done that yet. I haven't used my compost. Yeah. Too. But I was just having fun during COVID getting hot compost here, because that takes a lot of work here in Alaska to get hot compost, and I did it. It was smoking. I was so happy.
It's a labor of love for sure.
It is.
All right. Well, I think that gets us to the end of the questions that I have. Is there anything that you wanted to add, or? I feel like we pretty much covered it.
I think we have to. I would love to. I assume you'll put my information at the bottom, and anyone has any questions, I'd love to help. I think it's just great for all the way around, and it's simple. It's not something you have to invest your life in.
And it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of space.
No.
And yet it's the value that you get from it is phenomenal.
Right.
So, every gardener should have a couple buckets of worms, probably.
Exactly.
I
love it.
That's her mantra. All right. So, and do you sell worms? Can they get with you to,
I do.
to buy worms?
I sell
Okay.
worms and I sell the compost. And
There you go.
I've been surprised that how many people are interested. There's a national worm registry
Okay.
that someone told me about, and I just tapped my information in and left it there. And I've been contacted by a lot of people there. I am sitting worms there.
Susitna worms. Okay.
But I'm doing business as I don't know why I put that in there at the time. I like the name, but Alaska Wigglers is gonna be,
okay.
yeah. But on the website it's Susitna Worms.
Are you on Facebook or anything?
I am on Facebook.
Okay.
Yes.
On you personally, but is your business on Facebook too?
No, not yet.
Aha. Okay.
So we're working on that.
Okay. So we'll just link to your Facebook.
Okay.
If that works,
That
and
works.
or give whatever information you want to give. But
Okay.
yeah, I hope you're as excited about worms as I am. I'm like trying to figure out where we're gonna get a bucket and how I'm gonna get some worms here. So
I brought worms today. We may be good.
That's okay. That's right. I'm excited about this. So yeah, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Lisa. You can always reach out to us. And I just appreciate you listening. We'd love to have you follow us on YouTube. We're also on Instagram. We're on Facebook. And our website is commongroundalaska.com. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.